into providing some sort of an incentive program for CEOs. Do you see any change in the review periods for that as the company gets older? So in the early days, when there is a lot of variability to set the goals in January and then in December discover things have really changed, your awareness has changed, those goals no longer apply. That's a long sine wave sometimes. And then you end up in this completely subjective review period. Do you see any patterns or any correlation between the maturity of the company and the review period?
Well, certainly more mature companies usually use an annual period. Once you have revenue, you start having an annual budget and everything keys off of the annual budget. Before then, you're right, it can vary a bit based on what your cycle is, because you really want the bonus plan, everything to tie to your cycle. So you're judging things not on an arbitrary period. But after that, you said generally some point, once you're revenue oriented and that's what you're keying your variable pay off of, it goes to an annual cycle, and that continues up to even the largest companies.
I mean, I think in our case, it all sort of unfolds, right, during the year. And so we've had, a couple situations where we've had a mid-year reset of our plan and then step back from that and then basically, re-evaluate what the appropriate metrics are for the second half of the year, but you're still accountable for the first half results. And so I think, I think boards are flexible, and because I think if you think about it, really, your investors want you to succeed. They want you to be motivated, and they're not there to try to arm wrestle you to the ground and take all your money out of your pocket. And so, if you're way out of whack with what your plan says, that's not a good situation. On the other hand, they don't want to give you an easy out, right? And so, I think the sort of the mid-year adjustment is not at all uncommon, but then you might take it in the shorts for the first half of the year, but you've got a better chance to succeed in the second half, and then everybody sort of moves on from there.
We're also
I think just one question that you're sort of saying is it's a performance and a management question. It's not a compensation question, right? I mean, if things varies over the year and you don't find out till the end of the year what people were thinking, that's not about compensation. That's about your relationship with your board and their relationship with you. That's the way I would look at that. I mean,
I was just going to mention that we are seeing companies also putting in place programs that are not just annual programs, but semi-annual or quarterly, or some combination of semi-annual, quarterly with an annual component as well, trying to fine-tune it a little bit to address some of those issues.
Christine, can you comment on F shares, Series F shares?
Series F shares are, it's a special class of preferred stock that some companies are granting, particularly to their founders and executives. And they have special rights in terms of what people can get from those shares. They're treated more like preferred stockholders rather than common stockholders, and so there are benefits in terms of liquidity and liquidity preference and things like that. There's more value associated with it.
So I guess the first question was whether there's certain situations where acceleration is warranted for vesting, and when there's some reduced, shorter vesting period. I mean, my perspective, it's not going to be a surprise. Is no. I mean, you sign up for a particular deal, and that's the deal that you sign up for, and you think that equity is valuable. That's why you take the job. I don't see what to say another way around that. I don't have any comments on the Netflix compensation package. It sounds pretty smart to me.
I will disagree with my respected panel member. As a former CEO, when I took jobs, I always required acceleration, and the reason is because I was being paid to bring value to the shareholders, and if I brought value relatively rapidly, I feel I should have been rewarded rather than, let's say, if I brought value in 2 years, I'd only get half my stock. And if I brought a lot of value, I felt I should get all my stock. And, you get into, and like Christine.
Is that in a change of control situation?
A change of control.
No, he's just asking regular, without a change of control.
Oh, okay.
I don't think you were talking about change of control. You still disagree with me, Ken?
No, that one I don't disagree. I mean, I think that...
One variation on that we actually have been seeing is not necessarily a shorter overall vesting period, but we have seen more and more companies move to granting equity that has performance vesting criteria, which in some cases, depending on the vesting schedule and the performance goals, could result in faster vesting.
So if you want to speak a little bit about the Netflix program, it is a very unique program out there. So what they do is basically they try and target the 75th percentile and they come up with a cash number. That's supposed to be all in. There is no special annual bonus. And then you can take a portion of that. You can choose between taking all that in cash or taking a portion of that in option grants. And these are not your normal option grants in that they're fully vested on day one, and you can exercise them for the full 10-year term, whether you leave or not. And then those option grants are granted every month. The reason why they don't have an annual bonus program is their CEO believes that it's too complicated to administer, and if you have good people, they should be performing anyhow. The only other side to it, though, is they also have a very aggressive review process and a significant, they believe in sort of that Jack Welch model of turning over the bottom 10% constantly, with the thought that that way they can keep on preserving a very elite workforce. So we haven't seen anyone else use it, but they seem to be using it very successfully.
Back to kinds of shares that are being granted. You mentioned Series F. It'd be interesting to know more about that, but also trends in incentive stock options versus restricted stock purchases in terms of granting shares, and curious what the Netflix share type that's actually being granted is.
Sure. In our practice with emerging stage companies, we're still seeing incentive stock options being used as the primary form of equity compensation. There's been a lot of discussion about restricted stock and using restricted stock, particularly for real early stage companies where there are issues around obtaining a valuation in order to properly price your stock options and concerns around the tax issues associated with that. So we do see real early stage companies granting restricted stock and considering continuing that on for a longer period than they would have in past years. There are pros and cons to that. When you're granting restricted stock, you're creating more shareholders in the company, which creates a variety of issues that may not be good for the company. But generally, we still are seeing incentive stock options as the primary form of equity.
We see that too. Most private, until you get, except for your early stage founders where the stock is, whatever, a tenth of a penny, and they can buy it easily. At some point, then it's usually options until maybe very late stages where some companies will look at restricted stock or some form of RSUs that are vest normally but are paid out only on liquidity event. I think the tax consequences and also the retention quality of options make them more attractive. As Christine mentioned, when companies grant restricted stock, if you actually vest it and you pay the taxes and you own it, you can leave and you have that benefit. Whereas with the options, you may have to exercise and you may not have the cash or whatever to do that. So they have still an additional retention quality even after vesting.
Yeah, we see options pretty much.
Maybe we'll shift gears for a moment and talk about change of control compensation plans, or what some people refer to as management carve-out plans. We've been seeing a lot of these in